Leadership isn't just changing, it's evolving in ways we're only just beginning to imagine. And women, we're not playing this game anymore. We're the ones reshaping the entire field, building models, movements, and businesses that serve more than just a few. On the She Leads podcast, you'll hear real conversations with women who've broken through all kinds of barriers: revenue, identity, borders, and expectations. There's no sugarcoating here, just the truth, told by those who are living it. I'm Adrienne Garland, entrepreneur, strategist, educator, and creator of live experiences, gathering women leaders together for over a decade. And this is the She Leads podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the She Leads podcast. My next guest is focused on all of the things that we think about here every day at She Leads: women, worth, and wellness. Hence the name of Nancy's company, Women, Worth, and Wellness. Nancy is a connector and an influencer who attributes her success to personal courage, determination, and joy when focusing on women's health and wellness. She established Women, Worth, and Wellness in 1994 as a private client wealth advisor for her female clients and their families, and she continues to promote and inspire daring and caring leaders, encouraging them to step up and lead in the world, following in the footsteps from many other powerful women leaders of the past. Nancy's overarching purpose is to connect and influence for positive impact. I'm so very excited to speak to you today, Nancy, as women, no matter how far we've come, are still struggling with worth, whether that's self-worth, financial worth, or our worth as a place in society. So welcome to the She Leads podcast, Nancy.
Thank you, Adrienne. And I don't know if people can see my logo, but the logo is yes. It's like yes. And you're standing on a hill. And at one point somebody said, shouldn't that line be going the other way? And I said, no, you'd be standing in a ditch, standing on a hill. Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love it so much. And I'm so excited to dive right into everything today. So I have just, a question that I've been thinking about so much: the intersection of your work between health, wealth, net worth, and self-worth. I want to kick right off with a question. What do you believe is the most overlooked chain in that, or link, sorry, in that chain? And why do you think so many powerful women still struggle to tie all of that together?
I think courage. That's why I emphasize stepping up and stepping out. Like, really, women have so much capability and so much capacity. We know that they've got an incredible amount of capacity, but often you're just on that hamster wheel trying to do everything. Well, stop it. Stop it. So you've got to have the courage to really focus on the things that are most important to enhancing your life and well-being and the positive impact that you can have on others. And more often than not, that means you have to let a bunch of things go. You have to delegate, or you just have to say, no, that's not my job, or no, that isn't something that really interests me. I appreciate you asking me, but it isn't something that really interests me in the total scheme of things. So, it's that courage to have that dialogue with yourself so that you know how to present yourself to the rest of the world and make suitable choices.
So I think that, this just speaks to how we were brought up, what society sort of programs us to think about, especially as women. And I think that now more women are sort of waking up to this fact that we don't have to be everything for everybody and put ourselves last. But I can imagine in your growing up, my growing up, we were told to put our heads down, work hard, be quiet, and, we'll be recognized, but that never happens.
Right, exactly. It's like,
So how
who's
did you,
responsible?
yeah.
I was just going to say, who's responsible for the dust bunnies in your house? Like,
Yeah.
really, is it your responsibility? Not
No.
really. Not really. And so those are the kinds of conversations that you need to have. to allocate the amount of time and sense of responsibility you have towards everything.
Yeah. How did you come to this work in the first place? So you sort of started out in the financial realm of things. Can you let's go back to, how you started to really see this intersection of all of those things come together and why you expanded what it was that you were doing.
Okay, well, we'll back it up a little bit because the older you live, the more you put your whole life into perspective in terms of, forks in the road that happened and choices that you made. I was one of the first female managers for Procter and Gamble in Canada, and that was wonderful. That was fabulous. But of course, you motor on, and then the glass ceiling kicks in, and you're kind of forgotten. I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, so a couple of times I took a run at leaving. And my
Mhm.
VP at the time did not have one entrepreneurial bone in his body, so he kept managing me back into the business with new
Huh.
responsibilities or more money or whatever. And of course, this is a key learning. Always pay attention to who you're taking advice from. I was
Mm,
taking advice from him because he was more powerful than I, but at the same time, that was a mistake. So when
mhm.
I finally got the courage to leave and move on, that in itself was empowering. But more often than not, you shoot yourself out, and then it's kind of like, okay, now what? I'm out of
Yeah.
there, but now what? And so I left and ran politically because there was something that really was passionate that needed some attention. I wasn't going to win. I knew that, but I really wanted to make a difference in terms of getting a message out. Then
Mm,
through that process, I did a ton of community leadership. That in itself was like an MBA because
mm.
when you're in a corporate setting, there's a power structure. But when you get into
Yes.
the community, everybody has a voice. And so all of
Mm.
a sudden, there's no power except making sense of what you're trying to communicate. Well, after doing that for 4 years, I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to get a job out of this community because it's never ending. And that's when I was recruited into wealth management. And really, I should have been there 20 years earlier because my parents, both of whom had been investors, I had an older brother who was a stockbroker. So I'd grown up with this whole scenario around me, but hadn't thought of it as a career. And once I got there, it was like, this is fabulous. And the way it works, the way people would understand is that a big company will hire you once you've got all of your licenses in place. But as soon as you get there, you're now an entrepreneur. They don't give you
Sure.
clients. You got to go
Nope.
find your own. And you got to find the ones who you want to serve exceptionally well. And so that's when I decided I was going to focus on women. It was the early 90s, and that's just when women were starting to earn a whole lot more. And like this woman who redirected me, given packages where you're given a bag load of money and you find that, no man is really paying attention to who you are and what you're trying to do with this money. And so more women were starting into the whole investment world. And so I started to focus on women. But as I sat down with them, and realize their scenario, the last thing they wanted to talk about is their investment plan. They're just so harried from
Mm.
all the responsibilities they have in their household. It's almost like having a nurse practitioner on site. Well, how many women have all the knowledge they need to have for health related issues for their whole family? Their parents, their in-laws, their kids, blah blah blah. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to start having events with not for profit,
Mhm.
health related organizations that focused on women, starting with heart and stroke disease, or Heart and Stroke Foundation, because heart disease is the leading cause of death for women. And the symptoms of heart
Yes.
disease are quite different for women than they are for men. And
Yes.
so all of a sudden, women are coming to an event, they're gaining more knowledge, but now they've got some contacts. If they have questions about heart disease, they can go back to these people rather than Googling or trying to get your doctor to answer some questions. Those things just weren't happening. And so I did a plethora of those kinds of events, but I always charged a nominal amount, so $25 or $50, to point out
Mhm.
how that charitable gift fits into their whole net worth scenario. Because
Mm.
obviously it's a tax deduction, so let's see how far those dollars go. And we know that the more you give, the more impactful that will be on your bottom line. But we also know that when you're in a position to give or to share, that enhances your self worth. So people are
Mm.
starting to feel a whole lot better about their ability to give back for their bottom line financially, but also to be in a position to share.
Oh my god, so smart. And what I love about that is that is clearly an exchange of value there, right? They're getting information that they
Right,
are and good quality information that they might not be able to get on their own, and they're getting it in a very personalized, trustworthy manner. That's worth $25.
right.
More, more than that,
Exactly.
but you're also sort of teaching them that even at these smaller type of amounts that quote unquote anybody can afford or many people can afford, that they can invest in themselves in a way that is different than some of the things that I think even to this day get sort of shoved down women's throats, like take care of yourself, go to the spa, go buy a Louis Vuitton bag, buy this next outfit. No, that
No,
is taking you away
right,
from that takes your power away and unknowingly takes your power
right.
away.
It's superficial. It is absolutely superficial. And the other thing, Adrian, is we know that women like to go to things in groups. And
Yes.
so I would invite my clients and they would bring their friends. And that's where the one of the great ways that women learn. Because if you didn't ask the question, well, somebody else did. And then
Mhm.
you'll say, oh my goodness, what a great question. I had no idea. This is so we
Yep.
it's a collective learning experience on so many levels. So many
Mm.
levels.
And what I love about it too and how brilliant you are is that, it's not I think the whole financial wealth management industry has sort of been, skewed toward male financial advisors. And, when you go and you learn from them, and some of them are absolutely brilliant and incredible and amazing. But as a woman, there's an intimidation factor
Right,
there.
right.
And so by setting this up and demonstrating that you understand women and their health issues, their wellness issues, and you develop an event for that, they say, Nancy is a trustworthy individual. Let me not just talk to her about my health, but let me talk to her about my finances.
Correct. Correct.
So good.
Exactly. As a wealth advisor, you're really a catalyst because you have professional knowledge to obtain your licensing to begin with. But
Mhm.
the foundation of being a wealth advisor is know your client. The same way when you go to a new doctor, the first thing they do is order blood work. They've got to get a read on who you are. Same thing with a wealth advisor. And if you
Mm.
go up, often people will say, wow, you look like you're pretty successful. What would you recommend today as a good investment? No, we don't start the conversation there at all. We start talking about you, and we've got to
Mhm.
go through a whole questioning scenario so that I, as the wealth advisor, have a good sense of exactly who you are so that we can talk about those investments as it pertains to your wealth, what you want to do with that wealth, and how we can make this all work on an ongoing basis. So, it's
Mm.
very much a dialogue driven relationship.
So, have you seen any shifts in how women approach their wealth management, wealth building strategies from when you started in the 90s?
Yes, the more knowledge they gain, the more confident they become. The more confident you become, the more willing you are to ask stupid questions. If
Mm,
you don't feel confident that you have a good understanding of what this is all about, you're going to be a shrinking violet. And so you're
mm,
going to be vulnerable because people may talk you into things that are not necessarily right for you. So
mm.
you will ask a lot of questions. Why do you think that this is a good idea? If there's some new wealth opportunity that you're presenting, then that person should say, well, now, why do you think that that's a good thing for me? How does that fit into the plan that we're already working? And
Right.
you go on from there. Insurance is a really, really powerful part of a wealth plan. And normally, when you start to work with people, if you haven't communicated properly up front in terms of what you do and how you do it and what your offerings are, then when you start to introduce insurance, they kind of look at you like, you know what? I thought we were friends. And now you're trying to sell me some insurance. I knew this. I knew this was, okay, well, let's just back this up a bit. Why in the
Mhm,
world would insurance be part of a wealth plan? Well, it ties right back in to your health. And anybody who's listening, if you ever
mm,
want to know how healthy you are, apply for life insurance
mm,
because they go through your whole scenario with a fine tooth comb, and you're only going to get the very best rates if you are in exceptional health. And
mm,
that's why I encourage people to understand what a total wealth plan is. And the
mhm,
sooner you get underway with that framework, this when you're healthy, younger, assuming you're younger, that's also when you're going to get the best premiums. So, a wealth advisor will anticipate worst case scenarios. What happens if you are diagnosed with breast cancer? What happens if you do have a disability? What happens if there is premature death? All of these things are questions that need to be posed, and then protection, suitable protection, put in place based on your financial scenario and your
mhm,
financial level of comfort for all of this. So
mm.
it's again all part of the dialogue.
Very interesting. So there is a huge wealth transfer that's
Yes,
set to happen.
right.
How can women who will be the recipients of that wealth transfer, how can they start to educate themselves even more today and set themselves up and be able to figure out how to then make the investments that matter not only to them, but also invest in things that help our people, planet, the environment, right? Because when women have access to wealth, we do good things with it. We don't
Correct.
necessarily, set up the mission to Mars, which isn't
No,
necessarily a bad thing, but
right.
there are other things that we need to do to focus here and now.
Exactly.
So
And the overarching word to all of that is stewarding wealth. When you're earning a significant amount, you've got wealth to steward beyond just your means of covering your expenses. And you're absolutely right. Once you start to inherit wealth, how will I know how to steward this wealth exceptionally well? I mean, rather than a deer in the headlights, it's like, oh my goodness. Well, that's when you do need to educate yourself. So you can do a lot of reading. There are great books on this whole topic. But more importantly, whoever you're working with as your trusted advisor, start to talk to them. And if they look like a deer in the headlights, this isn't something that they're familiar with, then it's time to start interviewing other trusted advisors. Because if you
Mhm.
can see this wealth coming to you, it's like you're not going to do your own dental work. You need
Right.
that professional more than ever.
Mhm.
And the other part of it is once you feel confident that you see how this is all going to fit into your scenario, and you've decided that these are the organizations that you want to support, how do you know how well they're doing as an organization?
Right.
Because that's another whole component. You can decide to give somebody, X number of dollars and find out later, oh my goodness, there was something that happened in that organization that wasn't above board that cause some of their funds to be compromised, whatever. So there's a whole huge chapter on due diligence and being
Mhm.
exceptionally discerning.
All right. Quick announcement. She Leads Live. It's happening in New York City on November 6th and November 7th. And I want you there. Here's what we're doing. On November 6th, we're hosting the VIP evening at a multi-million dollar property staged by IMG New York City and Cheryl Eisen. This evening will include a smaller group of people, a high level panel of women investors, and deeper conversations. We'll also be kicking off the evening with a poetry reading to really set the tone for what's coming. Then, the next day, on November 7th, we'll all gather at the Renaissance Marriott Hotel in Chelsea. You'll hear from over 20 speakers, keynotes, panels, interactive sessions, and more. And of course, what would She Leads Live be without the Pitch the Media panel? You'll actually be able to pitch real journalists who are in the room, and that will give you feedback on what you need to do in order to increase your visibility in the media. And the networking, it's not just random, it's directed. So you'll be connecting with people who actually get where you are and where you're going. This conference, She Leads Live, is for women who've built something real. You're profitable, you're past that startup struggle, and you're asking yourself, what's next? Not in a retire and volunteer sort of way, but rather in a, I have options and resources now. What do I actually want to build? So head on over to sheleadsmedia.com to see the full speaker lineup and agenda and use code the She Leads podcast to get 25% off your ticket. VIP spots are limited, so get those now. I'll see you there. Do you, and I don't know whether you do this or this is not part of your advice, but I know that more and more women are taking the wealth that they've earned and, in wanting to invest in startup businesses, women-owned businesses, women that are creating new innovations that are specifically focused on helping women. How can someone sort of participate in contributing to, even if it's on a private level, perhaps investing in other women-owned businesses?
Make sure you've got a good lawyer, unless you're
Mhm,
prepared to whatever the investment is, just have it go out the window. So
mhm,
again, you have to be discerning and you really,
mhm.
really want to work with professionals and you need to ask a ton of questions, a lot of questions. Sometimes women get their arms twisted to invest in something if it's a family member or whatever. And they, basically get talked into something that maybe isn't the best to get talked into.
Mhm.
So right from the outset, unless you're prepared to lose all of that money, sometimes it's difficult to say no. And sometimes you
Right.
just weigh the consequences. If it is a family member and you're not willing to help out, then that can create other problems. And maybe for starters, you say, well, I really can't afford $5,000, which is what you're asking me for, but I'm definitely prepared to start with $1,000. And
Sure.
so let's start with $1,000 and let's keep me posted. If you're having meetings with your other investors, by all means include me and let's pay attention to how things unfold over time. And one other thing that you may be able to add, other than more money, is other resources that you've met
Mhm.
along the way that you think would be a great contact for this person. Or,
I love
some
that.
other woman who's building her business. How is she raising her money? So
Mm,
you may be able,
connections.
right, you
Yeah.
may be able to add different value than just writing a check.
Now, have you always worked exclusively with women, or do you have some male clients as well?
No, no, I've always had, when I started to focus on women, it wasn't women exclusively. So
Mhm.
it was women that I did extra events for. And more often than not, they were in a couple. And,
Yes.
Mr.'s happy that Mrs. is learning because if something happens to him, she needs to know.
That's
And
great.
yeah, so over the years, it was a lot of it was couples.
Ugh,
And, it's really interesting the scenarios that you run into. I had two couples, each of whom was a professional in that couple. And they were concerned that if one passed away, there wouldn't be enough money for the second one. They had
mhm.
lots of money, but this is what they were feeling. This is what
Right.
they were feeling. Okay, so back to insurance. Insurance is a solution. So you have an insurance policy that's joint, and it's joint based on the first to die. So
Mm,
whoever dies first, the other person would inherit that wealth. Well, it was so interesting because, everybody's got their preferences as far as their charitable donations in their estate plan, or some
mhm.
do, lots do. And so these two got into a big discussion about, well, you know what? If I die first and you get the money, are you going to give to those organizations that I want to support versus the ones that
Right.
you? So
Yeah.
more dialogue, more dialogue, more dialogue.
I think that's a great thing, though, to be able to have those types of conversations. And it's really refreshing to hear that it's not an argument, but rather discussion. And,
Right,
things that you wouldn't necessarily be talking about, day to day, right?
right,
It
right.
really is about forethought and it's making conscious decisions. And I think just that in and of itself, from the very beginning, making conscious decisions about what money can do for you and what it can do for your community and ultimately for the world. The question I was going to ask you was, and I'm sure that your colleagues and everything, they're helping with investments that are directed by men. I wanted to understand, do you see any difference between the way that men invest and, the world sort of is stacked in their favor at this point. Men hold the majority of wealth, right? So
Right.
is there a difference in the way that men invest versus the way that women invest? And is there something that women might be able to learn in order to build their wealth faster or maybe even more consistently?
Well, I think, and we know this, but again, it depends on the individual. Men are more willing to take a risk than women are.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes that really plays out into their favor, but sometimes not. And
Yeah.
so that's the kind of thing where a woman with her advisor can say, you know what? I would like to take 2% of my portfolio and put it in something that's a little bit riskier than perhaps some of the things that you have in my portfolio currently. If
Mhm.
that's of interest. Many women will say, you know what? I don't want anything risky. On the other hand, that's when the advisor says, well, we can't just stick in bonds or GICs or cash because we're missing out on a lot of opportunity. So it needs
Mhm.
to be that mix. It needs to be a combination of everything. And so, once again, women understanding all of this makes a huge difference. It's also so important, and we talked about this earlier about having that trusted advisor. You
Yeah.
may just trust that person to understand what your needs are and to invest your portfolio accordingly, making sure that you are kept up to date on changes that that person may want to make. That's
Mhm.
something that you should know. I had a good friend visiting a couple of months ago, and she said, I've got a Zoom with my advisor. I know her advisor, I know her well. And she said, Nancy, I would like you to just sit in as an extra set of ears to hear what's going on, because I just would like that. And so it's like listening to, on the telephone, one of those party lines. And so they went back and forth and back and forth. She's 78, spends a lot of time away. And I was really, really impressed with the whole conversation, the way it unfolded. And when they were finished and they were wrapping up, I just said, hi, it's Nancy. I've been listening, and you are truly exceptional.
Oh,
Because the one thing, she's scared to death of going into long term care longer term. Am I going to have enough money? In the meantime, I want to live my life. I've got
sure.
this money. So why? Anyway, the one thing, and we know what's happened with markets, they've been up and down. And, with the political leadership, you're never quite sure what's coming next. And so he said, no, I've got 3 years worth of support set aside, and I always will. So you're
Mm.
always going to be able to take your monthly. You're always going to be able to live your life. And as a matter of fact, if you've got extra requests or needs, let me know. We can take a lump sum. And then
Mm.
he said, this one stock that was in the portfolio, we've exceeded the level that I had set for it. So I want to take some profits. And this is another company that I'd like to invest in. So he's letting her know, what's going on, not just trust me. But I
Right.
was so impressed with that dialogue that occurred between the two of them. So
Mm.
impressed.
That's so good to know. And I mean, I think that's something to point out too. You know, financial advisors, the ones that you want have the
Right. Definitely.
responsibility for you and making sure that they are not doing anything that will harm your financial situation.
Correct. correct. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, she definitely would sleep well at night rather than, oh my God, am I going to have enough money? Oh my goodness. Anyway, he
Yeah.
assured her, he told her what he was doing. She understood. That's another thing, is to make sure you're checking with your client to make sure they understand what's in place rather than, oh,
Yes.
okay, whatever, I trust you. No, no, make sure you understand.
So let's talk to the I would say high school young women right now, okay?
Yep.
Who may not be thinking about their financial future. Some are. We know some are because there's some amazing young women that are out there. What would you say that a high school woman, a college woman must learn for herself so that when she graduates from college or any type of professional school, that when she sort of gets out into the working world, that she has done everything in her power to set herself up for financial independence?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that a wealth scenario is a framework and what's included
Mm,
in that whole framework, not just what stock should I own, because this is often what people think. If I'm going to pay attention to my wealth, what stock should I own? Is it too late to buy Apple? Like what in the
yeah.
world's going on? So again, it's a whole mixture. And again, I would encourage that person to start working with someone. And when you're first starting out, often wherever you bank will have a financial advisor that you can start with. But when
Mhm.
you talk to that financial advisor, talk in terms of a framework, not
Mm,
just, what amount of money do I need to save each month? It needs to be that whole framework. I mentioned earlier about insurance. That's a really,
mhm.
really important consideration when you're young, because obviously you're healthy, your chances are greater that you're going to be the healthiest you'll ever be. And therefore, any insurance will be at a lower cost. There was something else I was going to say.
Well, let me just jump in and ask. So, let's say there's, somebody and they've been working summer jobs or, whatever. And let's say they have $3,000, right? Like that's it. That's what they've got. And that's maybe spending money for when they're in college or maybe they have some type of a job. I don't know that like a young woman with a couple $1,000s like that would would feel comfortable saying like I'm going to go speak to a financial advisor to help me think about my $3,000 and how I can, help it to grow, especially if I have student loans and all of this kind of stuff. Would you encourage somebody to change that mindset and say whether you have $3,000, $300,000 or $35, you probably should be speaking to a financial advisor.
Exactly. Exactly. And start the relationship, because that person is a professional. They've got a wealth of knowledge that you may not have yet. And you really want to access that wealth of knowledge to support you and where you're headed, what you're trying to accomplish. And then over time, the chances are pretty good that you will outgrow that advisor. And that's when you move on. But
Mhm,
definitely start with somebody. And banks are the best place to start because they've got a AAA1 fiduciary responsibility to all of their clients with regards to absolutely everything. And they're the ones that have to keep up to date on new technology and new threats, with AI and scams and yada, yada, yada. So having a good relationship with your bank is really important. And longer
mhm,
and most banks have the investment wealth advisory channel as part of their offerings as well. So they may see, okay, this is what you've started with. This is how well you've done, which is super. I think now you're ready to work with one of our other advisors who perhaps is at a higher level. The other thing
mm,
that I wanted to say, and people learn this lesson sometimes too late, when you start with a corporation, and more often than not, that's where graduates will start. But if they have aspirations to be an entrepreneur, 10 years later, they may decide to move on. Okay, so your company will have lots of benefits for you. But 10 years later, when you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't have those benefits anymore. And now you've got to go and apply for them on your own.
mm.
So, to the extent that you can, start out with a suite of benefits personally, enhance them with those corporate benefits, and then you've
Smart.
already established a base for your future as an entrepreneur.
I love that advice so much because you have hit on something. So many women get to a point in
Mhm.
corporate America. You got there, I got
Yeah.
there, where we say, this ain't for me no more,
No,
right?
I'm out of
For
here.
whatever reason, I'm out of
Right,
here. And and that is a very real concern. I know that when I left corporate America, I had been so good. From the day that I started at my job, I started contributing to whatever 401k was offered to me. I maxed it out
right.
so that I could get the maximum company match and everything. And I did that the whole entire time that I was in. So
Perfect,
smart.
perfect, perfect.
Until I left and started my own company, when I stopped contributing to anything. I didn't open my own Roth IRA, I didn't do anything at all. So there was a period of, about, I would say, 7, 8 years that I didn't contribute to anything at all, and it really set me back.
Yeah,
Now, thank God now I have the ability to contribute to a 401k. I did start my own, but I also teach at NYU, and through their union, which is kind of a godsend, we are able to contribute to a
super,
401k.
super.
So I started building it back up again, but it really, really sort of stopped my wealth building ability, and I didn't realize how incredible I did without even thinking about it, right?
Yeah,
We just kind of carved that money away, let it do its thing, make sure that, it's aligned with your goals and all
right,
of that. But when you stop, it really can be a negative when it comes to your ultimate wealth goal at the end.
correct. Very smart, very smart. And women are smart. It's just a matter of knowing, okay, give me some advice about where I'm at right now. And that's
Yeah.
why getting input from a professional or more or friends is very smart. Keep asking,
Yeah.
keep asking. This is what I'm
Mhm.
planning on doing. What am I missing?
Yes. I love that. And that's where,
Mhm.
going back to the very first part of our conversation, where boldness and confidence comes in. Being
Correct.
confident to not be the all-knowing person in the room, have confidence to ask the question, because if you're thinking it, everybody else is thinking it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh,
Step up.
step up. I love that so much, and I teach entrepreneurship to undergrads and grads, and I we always get to sort of the finance section, and I tell everybody, "Do not be intimidated by finance. If
No,
you don't
no.
know what ROI means, you ask, 'What does that mean?' And
Right.
don't ever let someone steamroll over you. That is unacceptable. That is yesterday's behavior, and we are not here for it anymore."
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's
I
true. It's just having that confidence just and again, I emphasize that we are our own asset and you just need to
Yes.
value yourself as your number one asset. So what are you
Yes.
doing to protect your number one asset? Well, you may not know all of the things that you might consider. So keep
Yeah.
asking, keep asking.
I love that so much. Well, Nancy, I cannot thank you enough for spending time with me here today on the She Leads podcast. I know that our listeners have learned a great deal. If they want to reach out to you, get in touch with you, how can they do that?
The best thing they can do is send me an email because we're on all the social media, but we're in the process of figuring out our what next. And so if they send me an email, they'll be in our database and they can take or leave whatever we're pitching them on. But it's very simply Nancy at womenworthwellness.com. So Nancy at womenworthwellness.com. Send me an email, ask me whatever you want. I'm 24/7. If I don't get back to you the night before, I'll do it first thing the next morning. But I'd love to hear from people.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I really loved this conversation.
And likewise, thank you, Adrian, and keep up all your great works.
Hey everyone. So, for years, I've been working with Dr. Kent and sending people in my network his way. He does so much impact work What do I mean by that? Well, he helps people create books and podcasts and things like that. He even helps with this podcast behind the scenes. Dr. Kent is my thought partner. Anyone listening knows that we all need to do what we can to get our thoughts, opinions, and voices out into the world, and how important it is for women to invest in other women and for women to hire other women. I am all about that, and you all know that. But in this case, I think Dr. Kent is an exception. He's doing something really different via this new program that he's launched called the Genius Discovery Program. So he wants to work with people like me and like you who are impact driven. Dr. Kent has an intensive program that goes for a month. He also has a 3-month program where he figures out where you're headed with your brand, your business, your speaking, and your signature story as a thought leader. I've known Dr. Kent for a long time. So believe me when I say that he has a ton of experience working with people that are looking to make an impact but might not know exactly how to approach that. So if you're interested in talking to him, you can go directly to talktokent.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram at She Leads Media, or just shoot me an email over at hello@sheleadsmedia.com. That episode and that conversation challenged me in a way that I did not think was going to happen. When Nancy brought up insurance, I'll be honest, I had a bit of a negative reaction because insurance is one of those topics that feels more fear driven than empowering. The insurance industry has historically relied on high pressure sales tactics and, you know, coming up with sort of worst case scenarios so that we are pressured into purchasing something that who knows if we will ever use, if we will ever need. And to me, that feels sort of out of alignment with how most women want to engage, especially when we're talking about long term vision, agency, legacy, and trust. But when I took a step back, I realized that we don't necessarily need to think about insurance in that way. And one of the things that she said really stuck with me when she said that insurance is something that protects your most important asset, which is you. I'm sure that that line has been used by many insurance salesperson, but I thought, that has validity to it. So, could we think about insurance as a form of radical self respect, right? Protecting who we are and what we have created. So, can we maybe, or can I reframe insurance to not just being practical, something that you just, have to have, but something that might actually be looked at as maybe even powerful. Like so much of this conversation though, I just want to add, whatever it is that you think about insurance, whether you think it's sleazy, whether you think it's needed, whether you do look at it as a radical form of power and in, protecting your most valuable asset, it reminds me that no matter what, we have to educate ourselves and make decisions for ourselves through our own lens, through our own beliefs. And we also have to challenge our thinking, right? So, no matter what, we have to ask ourselves, are we caught in a particular mindset? Or can we see validity? Can we see benefit? And just make sure that we're thinking through everything and really truly educating ourselves. I have a negative reaction to insurance and insurance salespeople because I know that the insurance agents are incentivized on commission and not necessarily what's best for you. Too often, it's sort of what's best for the big insurance companies. And to me, that, it just kind of It doesn't feel genuine, and it just feels like, here we are lining the pockets of, the corporate infrastructure, and that's something that bothers me. So again, the message that I just want to put out here is, I am not pro or con insurance. I have business insurance, I have my own life insurance. And it's often something that when you work in a corporation that is provided to you. And I do think that that insurance is a good thing in a lot of cases. So we just need to be careful about maybe how insurance is sold, what insurance agents are saying, but just think for a second about how it can protect your most precious asset, which is you. So, this, along with other financial tools, let's really look at those and consider those as levers for sovereignty, not necessarily symbols of scarcity. These are the kinds of questions that we need to keep asking if we want real, lasting transformation, not only for ourselves, but also for the women that are coming after us. And I know that I specifically asked that question about what would you tell a high school woman, because I do wish that when I was in high school, that even though I did educate myself, I wish I had done that even more, and that I had a plan for myself from the very beginning. So thank you so much to for listening into this episode, and I hope that you enjoyed it and that you were able to take away something for yourself. And if nothing else, the message is educate yourself about finance and financial matters. Thank you so much for listening. If this conversation moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review. It's not just about boosting the show, it's about amplifying the voices of women entrepreneurs who are leading with vision, building with purpose, and shaping what's next. We need more of these conversations in the world right now, don't you think? And if someone came to mind while you were listening, someone who matters to you, send this episode to them. If there's something on your mind about leadership, legacy, or what's next, I want to hear it. Head to sheleadsmedia.com/voice and leave a voice memo or note. Your insight might just help shape a future episode. Make sure to follow the show and come back next week for more conversations you won't hear anywhere else. Thank you so much for listening. This is the She Leads Podcast Network. This is the She Leads Podcast Network.